Welcome back, everybody, to another week of Sunday School here at the Lighthouse Church of the Nazarene in Moravia, Iowa, where we are going through the book of Isaiah. This week, we're going to be in Isaiah chapter 19. Now, last week in Isaiah chapter 18, we saw the burden against Ethiopia. And I told you that most commentators say that Isaiah chapter 18 is one of the most complicated chapters in all of Isaiah, one of the most hardest to understand in all of Isaiah. Well, this week we're in Isaiah chapter 19, and it's the proclamation against Egypt, the judgment against Egypt. Now, we have to think about this. When we read the prophetic books of the Bible, we need to ask ourselves something. We need to say, has this already happened? Is it happening right now, or is it something that's going to take place in the future? And the really interesting thing about Isaiah chapter 19 is I believe we're going to see all three of those things taking place in this chapter. Past events, present events happening right now, and future events. So let's just get out our Bibles and let's follow along. We're in Isaiah chapter 19, verse 1, in which the prophet Isaiah says, the burden against Egypt. Isn't that amazing that in our Bible, it's talking about a nation that's still present today, that we can put our finger on a map and find, but this nation was also present clear back in the beginning of the Bible. I believe Egypt's first mentioned in Genesis chapter 12, where Abraham actually has to go to Egypt because of famine in the land. So the nation of Egypt, what we're talking about, we know it exists today. It existed all the way back then. So it says, the burden against Egypt. Behold, the Lord rides on a swift cloud. I just love how the picture we have here. What does God use for transportation? The clouds are his chariots. Isn't that amazing? Now, this is just symbolic, but I believe it shows his authority over all creation. He can do what he wants. And remember what Jesus said to Pilate while Jesus was standing trial before Pilate. Jesus said, hereafter you will see me sitting at the right hand of God and coming on the clouds of heaven. The same thing that we see right here. So it says, the burden against Egypt. Behold, the Lord rides on a swift cloud and will come into Egypt. The idols of Egypt will totter at his presence, and the heart of Egypt will melt in its midst. It's talking about the idols here. Idols, the word idols in Hebrew, the literal meaning of it is worthless things, good for nothing. Can I tell you, we fill our lives up with a lot of worthless things. We fill our lives up with idols. Now, Egypt, they had a lot of idols. They had many different gods and goddesses. In fact, when we go through the book of Exodus and we read about the 10 plagues that Moses brought upon them, most of those 10 plagues that they were understood as direct challenges to specific gods at that time in Egypt. So the idols of Egypt, they're going to come to nothing. What is an idol? It's a worthless thing. You and I, we have lots of worthless things in our lives, and we need to be careful about that. Verse 2, I will set Egyptians against Egyptians. This is God saying, I'm going to do it. I'm going to set Egyptians against Egyptians. Everyone will fight against his brother, and everyone against his neighbor, city against city, kingdom against kingdom. What's he saying? He's saying there's going to be civil war in the land. Now, Jesus said, it's in Matthew chapter 12. Jesus said, a house divided against itself cannot stand. You can't have division in the house and expect it to stand. Abraham Lincoln, he gave a speech about this very thing, and his speech was entitled, A House Divided. Now, we can see there is a judgment from God like this where it brings about civil war, armies turning on each other, the same army. And we see it many times in the Old Testament where God causes the armies to war against each other that were coming against Israel. If you remember in the book of Judges, when you have Gideon versus the Midianites, Gideon only had 300 men, and he was taking on 135,000 Midianites. And what happened? The Midianites, they all just turned on each other and started fighting each other, and they killed each other. And Gideon and his men, they didn't even have to do anything. So let's keep going here. Verse 3. The spirit of Egypt will fail in its midst. I will destroy their counsel, and they will consult the idols and the charmers, the mediums and the sorcerers, and the Egyptians I will give into the hand of a cruel master, and a fierce king will rule over them, says the Lord of hosts. Now, we have to ask ourselves, has this already taken place? God says, I'm going to set an evil taskmaster over them, a cruel master. Has this taken place? Well, there was an Assyrian king. His name was Esarhaddon. He came upon them in 671 BC, and that is probably what this is referring to right here. We need to think about this. There's a biblical thing that says you reap what you sow. Remember the Egyptians, that they were cruel taskmasters over the Israelites. We read about that in the book of Exodus. So now what happens to them? They reap what they sow. They now have a cruel taskmaster over them. Now, Egypt has been under the rule of plenty of other nations throughout time. The Assyrians did it in 671 BC. They've been under the Persians, the Greeks, the Romans, the British. They were part of the Ottoman Empire. So this right here, it's probably already taken place, is what we're going to guess. But now, in verses 5 through 10, pay attention to this, because this gets really interesting. Verse 5, the waters will fail from the sea, and the river will be wasted and dried up. The rivers will turn foul. The brooks of defense will be emptied and dried up. The reeds and the rushes will wither. The papyrus reeds by the river and by the mouth of the river, and everything sown by the river will wither, be driven away, and be no more. The fishermen also will mourn, and those will lament who cast hooks into the river, and they will languish who spread nets on the waters. Moreover, those who work in fine flax and those who weave fine fabric will be ashamed, and its foundation will be broken. All who make wages will be troubled of soul. This is really interesting right here. This is talking about the Nile River right here, and it says it's going to fail. It's going to be dried up. Now, the Nile River flows through Egypt, starts up in Ethiopia, goes through Sudan, then goes into Egypt, then empties into the Mediterranean Sea. And it's the lifeblood of Egypt. It's paramount to Egypt's economy. And without it, Egypt wouldn't survive. But look in verse 5 there where it says, the river will be dried up. It's saying the Nile River will be dried up. Now, to my knowledge, and I looked this up, this has never happened, what Isaiah is talking about here. And we know if Isaiah says something's going to happen, it's going to happen. So to our knowledge, the Nile River has never been dried up like it's talking about here. But in 1970, with the help of the Russians, the Egyptians completed something called the Aswan Dam, where they actually dammed up the Nile River. You see, the Nile River used to flood seasonally, and it would flush out the riverbed. It would bring nutrients from up above down below and fertilize all the land so that the delta region of that would be very fertile land. But guess what? They dammed it up, and there are lots of unintended bad consequences because they dammed up the river. Now, all that fertile plains is no longer fertile because it's not getting flooded from up above. Also, guess what? The salt water from the Mediterranean has now worked its way back up the Nile River, and there is no fishing industry there anymore. Also, there's a snail that attaches to all the plant life in that region, and guess what? It is no longer going on. So there's lots of unintended consequences happening right now. In fact, some Egyptians think they need to just blow up the dam and they'll be better off without it. So we could be seeing this fulfilled in our days. And then listen to this. This is really interesting. This just happened this week, talking about the Nile River and it drying up. The Ethiopians just this week, they completed something that they call the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, where they built their dam up on the Blue Nile, way up above the Nile River. Egypt and Sudan are not happy about it, and they're thinking that this could dry it up right now. And this is happening right here in our days. Very interesting stuff. I also want to show you something else here in verse 10. It says, all who make wages will be troubled of soul. They're saying there will be no way, there will be no work, there will be no way to make money because the river's dried up. The Bible does tell us that work is good. The Apostle Paul said it's in 2 Thessalonians 3:10. He says, if a man does not work, neither shall he eat. It's in the book of Ephesians. Ephesians 4:28 says, let all of us work with our own hands so that we have something to share with others. Man's happiest when he's sweating by his brow, when he's building something, when he has something to do, a reason to get out of bed. Work is good according to the Bible here. Let's keep going here. Verse 11. Surely the princes of Zon are fools. Zon was a village, a city in Egypt. Pharaoh's wise counselors, they give foolish counsel. How do you say to Pharaoh, I am the son of the wise, the son of ancient kings? Where are they? Where are your wise men? Let them tell you now, and let them know what the Lord of hosts has purposed upon Egypt. The princes of Zon have become fools. The princes of Noph are deceived. They also have deluded Egypt, those who are the mainstay of its tribes. I believe it's back in Isaiah chapter 1 or 2 where we talked about when God brings judgment on a nation, he will take away his godly leadership. We're seeing this right here. For centuries, the Egyptians, they were known for being wise. But what are their leaders now? Their leaders are fools. I think we can look at this in our own country today. Let's think about the United States of America. Our founding fathers, they were very, very intelligent people. They were geniuses. But well, what are we now? We're pretty much a nation ruled by morons is what we are right now. We have to remember this. All wisdom comes from God. The Bible tells us that. In Proverbs 2:6 says, for the Lord gives wisdom. Out of his mouth comes understanding and knowledge. And the beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord. The Bible tells us that too. So if we take God out of the equation, there is now no more wisdom. And we need to remember this. Worldly wisdom will come to nothing. I'm going to read to you 1 Corinthians 1:20 right here, where Paul says, where's the wise? Where's the scribe? Where's the disputer of this age? Has not God made foolish the wisdom of this world? Think about all the people that think they're intelligent, but they don't have God in their lives. Remember, worldly wisdom will come to nothing. When God judges a nation, he will take away their godly leadership. Let's keep going here. We're in verse 14. We're almost done. The Lord has mingled a perverse spirit in her midst, and they have caused Egypt to err in all her work. As a drunken man staggers in his vomit, neither will there be any work for Egypt, which the head or tail, palm branch or bulrush may do. Notice that it was God who took away the godly leadership right here. It said, the Lord has mingled a perverse spirit in his midst. This was the Lord's doing. He is the one who gave them unqualified counselors. He's the one that brought judgment on them. Now let's go to verse 16. In that day, Egypt will be like women and will be afraid and fear because of the waving of the hand over the Lord of hosts, which he waves over it. And the NIV, instead of saying like women, it says weaklings. The New Living Translation says weak as a woman. The Bible tells us in 1 Peter 3:7, it refers to women as the weaker vessel. Now, some people will be offended and say that's not right, but for the most part, men are stronger than women. We need to get back to those gender roles, actually, where men are the providers and the protectors, and the women are the nurturers and the helpmates. I'll just keep going. Verse 17, and the land of Judah will be a terror to Egypt. Everyone who makes mention of it will be afraid in himself because of the counsel of the Lord of hosts, which he has determined against it. Notice it says, in that day. We're going to get 5 sayings right here. If you're reading along in your Bible, the next 5 paragraphs are all going to say, in that day, in that day. So this will be a future time, probably during the reign of Christ here on this earth, known as his 1,000-year millennial reign. Let's keep going right here. Verse 18. In that day, 5 cities in the land of Egypt will speak the language of Canaan and swear by the Lord of hosts. One will be called the city of destruction. In that day, there will be an altar to the Lord in the midst of the land of Egypt and a pillar to the Lord at its border. Now, one guy I was reading, he was interesting. He said that the pyramids of Egypt, the biggest one is right on the border, and maybe it was a pillar of the Lord. I don't know. Verse 20, and it will be for a sign and for a witness to the Lord of hosts in the land of Egypt, for they will cry to the Lord because of the oppressors, and he will send them a Savior and a mighty one, and he will deliver them. Then the Lord will be known to Egypt, and the Egyptians will know the Lord in that day, and will make sacrifices and offerings. Yes, they will make a vow to the Lord and perform it. And the Lord will strike Egypt. He will strike it and heal it. Then they will return to the Lord, and he will be entreated by them and heal them. Verse 23. In that day there will be a highway from Egypt to Assyria, and the Assyrians will come into Egypt, and the Egyptians into Assyria, and the Egyptians will serve with the Assyrians. Now it's talking about a highway right here. Later on in the book of Isaiah, it's in Isaiah chapter 35, we're going to get a verse talking about the highway of holiness. The highway of holiness is not a literal highway. It's just where God has removed any obstacles to be known, to know him by Jesus Christ. That's how he did it. So is this a literal highway right here? Well, it seems to be. So it talks about the Assyrians coming into Egypt, the Egyptians going into Assyria. And remember, Assyria is modern day Iraq right now. So let's keep going. Verse 24. In that day, Israel will be one of three with Egypt and Assyria, a blessing in the midst of the land, whom the Lord of hosts shall bless, saying, Blessed is Egypt, my people, and Assyria, the work of my hands. Remember, Assyria is modern day Iraq. God's saying it's going to be the work of my hands. Egypt's going to be referred to as people, and Israel, my inheritance. Now, this is real interesting. Has this happened yet? No, it has not happened yet. But if Isaiah says it's going to happen, guess what? It's going to happen. It's in the book of Habakkuk. It's Habakkuk 2:14, talks about a time when the whole earth will be filled with the knowledge of God. And I believe that's what this is talking about right here. When the Assyrians and the Egyptians and the people of Israel will all be serving the one God. Well, we're done for this week. Hope you enjoyed this lesson. I hope you learned something. And I'll see you the same time, same place next week. Bye.